From holding its first Olympic Games just 14 years ago, Beijing is now the only city in the world to host both the Summer and Winter Olympics. How has China transformed in these 14 years? What kind of efforts and innovations made the dual Olympic city record possible? Earlier, I talked to Anthony Edgar, Senior Advisor for Beijing 2022 from the main media center for the Winter Games. Here are his personal stories in this journey. Mr. Edgar, thank you so much for joining us. I understand that you have been involved with the Olympic Games, all of these Olympic Games since 1996. Help us understand your passion for the 5 rings. Exactly what prompts you to be personally involved in all of these?
I was a sports person in my youth, and I did a lot of sports, some of them very well, including representing Australia in junior rugby union and doing athletics and swimming and surfing and skateboarding. And then I joined, when I got a job, I went into the media. So when Sydney 2000 came along, I thought I was the best person who should look after all of the content. And because Australia, for example, in some cases is a pies and beers and footy type audience, in the sense that they'll cover rugby union, rugby league, they'll cover big sports, but they won't necessarily know taekwondo or table tennis or handball or many of the other sports that are on the Olympic program. But that is what I was interested in. So I stopped what I was doing, and I thought I would go to Sydney 2000 after the Atlanta Olympic Games, and I was responsible for all of the sports content, the Olympic and Paralympic Games. And my job was basically to write about sport and interview world and Olympic champions for 4 years, and I thought it was the best job in the world.
So I understand for 2008, the Beijing Summer Olympic Games, you were advising Beijing already, and you're advising Beijing this time. But tell us a bit about your decision to get involved as an advisor for the Games in Beijing.
Well, to do that, I've got to step back a bit. So after the Sydney Olympic Games, I was offered a job as the press chief for the International Volleyball Federation in Switzerland. And I was there for a couple of years, and at that time, the IAC decided to start up the host broadcasting operations of the Olympic Games. So Mr. Gilbert Felly, who was the first executive director of the IAC for the Olympic Games, invited me to join the IAC as head of media operations. So that was in 2002. Now it happened because, yes, I'd worked with Gilbert in Sydney for many years, for the 4 years, but I was also in Switzerland, so I was in the right place at the right time. So in, 2.5 years ago, just at near the start of the COVID, after 18 years at the IRC, I retired. I took an early retirement and went back to Australia. And almost the day after, Ms. Big Shu, who's head of Director General of Media Operations for BOCOG, gave me a call and said, "How about you work for us?" So that's how that happened. I'd been to Beijing, I think, 32 times before 2008. So I had some very close friends here. I'd worked with many different people who are still working on the 2022 Games. And I felt it was a great opportunity to work with the first city that's ever held both a summer and a winter Olympic Games. And even in that, I was not here to tell or to show BOCOG how to run the games. They'd already run one of the most successful summer games ever. I was more here to help them understand the differences between a summer games and a winter games. And they hadn't run many winter sports before, but I'd been to every summer and winter Olympic Games. So I knew that side of things a bit better than them. So it's been a very good partnership, I felt. I've been very happy with them.
How would you rate as the biggest challenge, though, for Beijing, having had the experience of the Summer Games in 2008, now organizing a much smaller scale sporting event? But what do you think, what did you foresee to be the biggest challenge? And How are things going now that, you know, the games have been on for, and it's almost over by now?
I always knew that the venues would be spectacular. So I never ever doubted the venues. Many of the venues, all of the Beijing venues, for example, I'd already worked in with them because they're a legacy from 2008. And I knew them very, very well. And I knew how well the Chinese staff managed those venues in 2008. So yes, they were building new venues up in the mountains, and I knew that they would be incredible venues. So there was not a question on that. The issue really came when COVID started. So obviously with Tokyo delayed 1 year, usually there's 2 years between a Summer Games and a Winter Games. When Tokyo was delayed a year, and then there were still questions right up to the very end, is that will it happen, will it happen? That meant that the focus was not so much on Beijing anymore. So they, in one sense, maybe they lost a bit of a year of international people coming to Beijing to help them work on the games. So they're working quite independently and very respectful of what Tokyo was going through and the difficulties it was going through, but also still not even knowing what was going to happen in February 2022. Would COVID be bad still? Would it be better? Would it be worse? So they devised, in 2008, for example, if you were at those games, the Olympic Park was one large area where everyone was free to move around, and it worked beautifully. That was the plan here. But with COVID, they decided on the closed loop system, where to separate the public from the accredited groups. And so they've done an awful lot of work on that, which it impacted on the transport, it impacted on hotels, it impacted on people being able to go and experience Beijing life, for example, in the restaurants around the city. In 2008, there was, but all of the venues were in Beijing, with except for equestrian, which is in Hong Kong, and football. But in these Winter Games, you've got 3 different clusters. So you've got the ice sports in Beijing, then the downhill and the sliding in Yanqing, and then the freestyle and snow sports up in Zhangjiakou. So there were benefits in having 3 different clusters. So you could actually control if there was a COVID outbreak or something like that, which hasn't happened. You were able to control it a lot better. So the work they've been doing for these games, a lot of it has been about things that really no one has ever experienced for an Olympic Games, except for Tokyo, of course.
How would you, I mean, you are advising, but of course you must also be observing and seeing how things are and thinking about them. So we've heard pretty good feedback from many of the people who are on the ground in China now. But you know, if you are not in China, you may read about complaints, about hiccups. Being inside the loop all this time, what has been your observation?
Well, my personal experience, I was here for over 2.5 months outside of the loop, so I was actually lucky enough to see Beijing, which I really loved because I noticed there were no other tourists, and often I'd go out on the weekend and go to the Forbidden City or my favorite Futon or the restaurants, and I was the only non-Chinese there, so I actually got to see your city in a very unique way.
Mixed feelings for the shops, for the hotels, for the restaurants.
Yeah. But when it came into being in the closed loop, it meant that stay in a hotel and you hope that it's got a good restaurant. And fortunately, I've been in hotels and they've got great restaurants in the selection. And you come to work, and the MMC was the first place to go into the closed loop, and then some of the other venues started. So we're limited in going from hotel to the MMC and to the venues and then back again. So that's a very different sort of environment for the Olympics. But remember, myself, but also the accredited media, they came here to report on the Olympic Games. They didn't come here to report on the restaurants in a particular part of Beijing. So yes, it's impacted them, but they were here to watch and cover sport. and that they've been able to do. And Mr. Gene Gosper, who was the technical director for the International Ski Federation, looking after the freestyle sports, he said to me the other day that he feels that Beijing has exceeded all expectations, and that all of the venues that he's been responsible for, which are all the freestyle sports, have worked beautifully. The half pipe and the slope style and the big air and all of those events have been incredibly successful, with many athletes saying, for example, it's the best half pipe they've ever been on, and the big air is there permanently now. So there have been many who've actually been involved as athletes and media who have been saying inside the venues it's absolutely spectacular. Moving around is more difficult than it has been in the past.
Yeah, tell us a bit about the rest of your day. Are you still going to be very busy as an advisor as we are coming to the close of the Games?
You need to make sure that you don't let the ball go before you're at the finish line. And we're not there yet. And even when I was at the ISC as well, you're trying to remind everyone, until everyone gets onto a flight home, that's when you can say it's over. Not with the closing ceremony. The closing ceremony just means for those in arrivals and departures, they've got 30 or 40,000 people to get to an airport and get home. And that is a big deal in itself. So it's like, from my point of view, the Olympic Games doesn't start with the opening ceremony. It starts at least a month before, when the media centre opens and the people start arriving. And it's the same with the departure. We have different sort of zones. So there's still a long way to go in getting everyone out of Beijing safely in a COVID time is a big step in itself.
Okay, fingers crossed for everybody.
Oh, it'll be fun.
Who has been working so hard, and of course we still have the Paralympics coming up, so that is still something to watch out for. Many thanks to Anthony Edgar, Senior Advisor to the BOCOG organizer of the Beijing Winter Olympic Games.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anthony Edgar, Senior Advisor for Beijing 2022, speaking from the main media center of the Games. With that, we come to the end of this edition of The Point with me, Li Xin. As always, you can follow me on Facebook and Twitter using the handle Li Xin in Beijing. Download the application called CGTN to watch the show on your mobile devices, or go to YouTube and look for CGTN The Point. Thanks for watching. You've got The Point.